everyone, to this week's presentation for Kinesiology 321, Theory of Physical Education. Now, this week there are only a few things to cover, and I hope to provide more clarification on our assignment guidelines and expectations. Now, although we are not meeting this week, I hope that you do not neglect your devotional time. And I want to redirect you to the verse I include on all of my syllabi, which is Colossians 3:17, to kind of cover up or take up for this devotional time that we're missing. And Colossians 3:17 says, "And whatsoever ye do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him." Now, I know that there are some struggles with assignments and meeting the expectations, meeting the criteria for all of those, but there are many other things that we do on a daily basis that we tend to just do out of habit, without giving a second thought. So my challenge for you is to constantly reflect on everything you do, whether in school, at work, during your recreational time, your social time, how you conduct yourselves on a daily basis. Consider whether or not your actions are aligned with Colossians 3:17. Are we approaching everything we do as if we are doing it for the Lord? So reflect on that as we move into our course information. This week, you are expected to read Chapter 9, which is full of tons of legal terminology that you may not even remember. But the important thing that I want you to take away from Chapter 9 is, how are you protecting yourself and your students from issues of liability? Are you providing a truly safe environment for your students? Are you aware of all the possibilities that can go wrong, and are you trying to correct those? And this kind of goes back to our dodgeball discussion. If you're playing dodgeball in a physical education class and someone gets seriously hurt, you are liable. In many instances, the school will not protect you from something like this. And almost most dodgeball injuries occur from students colliding with each other, not necessarily from getting hit with the ball. So you can determine if a few minutes of uninstructional time or for so-called fun is worth facing the legal issues related to participating in a Hall of Shame type game. Also, read Chapter 10, which is pretty simple and straightforward. Consider the facilities you have available to you, and these are generally outside of your control, but think about the things that you can do with the facilities, the equipment, the services, the things that you have available, rather than what you are unable to do. And then read Chapter 11, which can really make a difference in physical education instruction. Integrating subject with physical education is not only a good idea for enhancing subject matter and improving the perception of physical education, it's also one of the expectations for Common Core. So consider how you can incorporate an academic topic with physical education while still focusing on the PE standard. Keep in mind that when you do this, it's something that can be easily done, but you don't want to overshadow the fact that it is still a physical education lesson if you're enhancing academic performance. Now, you can also do this in the classroom by bringing in physical activity to focus mainly on an academic standard. But integrated lessons are an excellent idea for you to conduct your PE lesson that you're going to teach. And many of these don't require a lot of equipment, and they can also be done in the classroom. So complete your chapter readings, and don't forget to complete test number 4, which also covers these chapters. Now, let me switch for a moment and review your curriculum project steps. I reviewed these in class, but I want to remind you and provide you this example, which I normally don't do because I love you so much, provide you with this same example that I mentioned in class. Remember, when you do step 4, when you complete step 4, remember to include a behavior, a condition, and a criterion within your objective statement. Also, be sure you understand the differences between the domains and what each domain usually addresses: the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective. Many of you in the previous steps didn't seem to have a clear understanding of each domain, and this information was covered in class as well as covered in the textbook, so be sure you review that in case you're unsure, and always ask me questions if you have some. So in our example, we have our psychomotor student-centered objective. The student will be able to pass a frisbee to a laterally running teammate using the backhand pass accurately at least once in a modified game. We have our behavior, condition, and criterion. Behavior is performing the frisbee backhand pass. The condition is to a laterally running teammate, and the criterion is at least once in a modified game. And then we have a rationale statement. The concept of passing to a laterally running teammate also is a transferable skill, and so on and so on. So when you complete your step 4, remember to follow these formatting guidelines. Be sure you include everything that you have to include in there. Take your time, proofread, read over your statement, make sure it makes sense to you. Now, when you're formatting this, follow APA formatting guidelines. For example, if this is your assignment title or heading, it's not to be bold, but it is centered. If this is a section heading that identifies the contents of the paragraphs that's going to come after it, it is centered and bold. So the heading or title of a page or paper is centered but not in bold, and all section headings are centered and also they're in bold type. Now identify and number your objective statements, as well as identifying which domain it's addressing. So follow this with your objective. Remember to begin it with "the student will be able to." Now note, double space your entire document. Don't add additional spaces between section headings. Don't add additional spaces between paragraphs. Microsoft Word often has this pre-setting that includes an extra space in between paragraphs or each time you hit enter. So figure out how you can eliminate that so your page or your paper is consistently double spaced. Now, following your objective statement, provide your rationale or justification statement as to why the objective that you've included is important. Think about how the objective can be beneficial to the students and why you even think it's important enough to include it in your objective, which is included in your overall curriculum process. So hopefully this is helpful information in completing your step 4. Review that if you're still confused. Next, step 5. And step 5 is probably one of the most simple steps in the curriculum process, but it provides some interesting information. Now, once you've completed step 5, and additionally you should have completed some other steps as well that we're actually skipping for our purposes, but once you have that done, you'll be able to see the problem with how much instructional time is actually designed towards meeting the physical education goals. For step 5, you will develop a scope and sequence chart that identifies how much instructional time is actually available in your program. You'll include in your chart all the grade levels that your program is going to cover. So if you're focusing on elementary school, you should cover K through 5. If you're in middle school, 6 through 8, and high school, 9 through 12. And we kind of mentioned before that although most seniors don't take physical education, you still need to account for that because the standards cover those. Now next, this information is somewhat addressed in previous steps, the fact that there are things that cut into physical education instruction, and we estimate this to be about 10% of the total time scheduled for instruction. Things such as picture days, field trips, different pull-out programs, assemblies, all those things usually occur during physical education instructional time. So your chart may look something like this. You have your grade level listed, how many weeks there are in a school year, how many instructional minutes there are for PE, how often students have PE time. And then this is calculated to determine how many minutes are actually available. Then you'll subtract the 10% that we discussed that accounts for the missing PE time, and then provide a final amount of instructional minutes and hours that students will actually spend in physical education instruction. After looking at this, we should use the instructional time wisely and effectively when we're teaching, because rarely do students meet the recommended amount of instruction. And so it's important for us as professionals, as teachers, to look at this and say, I only have my students for a small amount of time. I need to provide them the best instruction, the most meaningful instruction, design my classes to provide them with all the tools that they're going to need before they move on to the next step. So be sure that you're completing this properly. Once you have all that set up, all you need to do is just simply include this chart at the end of your curriculum. Or that's the only thing that's going to be included in that particular section. And so at the end, once you have all the steps completed, you'll just kind of combine them all into one moving document. Now, the next assignment that's due is your PE position paper. And this is very similar to a philosophy, but it includes a little bit more, as I mentioned in class. But be sure that you read through the assignment guidelines. I've tried to provide some clear expectations for this assignment, so view those expectations, and also be sure you read the rubric as well, because that gives you some information as to how it's going to be graded. It's also good to get into the habit of proofreading your papers and even having someone else proofread them as well. Oftentimes, a different set of eyes can see things that we may have missed. Adhere to the APA formatting guidelines and be clear on what you are saying. If you make a claim, if you state a belief, if you mention an opinion, you must support it. And that support can come from either including a reference citation or explaining in detail an experience that led you to that belief or opinion. So providing some background information. Why is it that you believe that, as opposed to just kind of making a general statement? Again, always provide enough detail and supporting information in your paper to really clarify what you're trying to convey to the reader. Now, that should be it for now. Many of you have had feedback on some of the previous steps and previous assignments. Be sure you read that feedback so you're not making the same consistent mistakes over and over and over. As always, please let me know if you're confused or if you're unsure about something. I am here to help. I am here to answer your questions. So let me know if you have any. That's it for now. Take care, and we'll see you next time.